Hey, we're live. Welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I am Ed Raby, your host, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Um, Welcome all. I'm sure people will start to roll in here in a little bit now that we're live. So thanks everybody for coming out. Just to get one announcement out the way, I am feeling better. This week has been a real monster in terms of physical health. So there's that aspect of it, but also because of that, there's a little bit of mental stuff that goes on. I think a lot of it is my hypersensitivity is really acting up right now. Um, Part of that is the heat. Michigan still hasn't cooled off, believe it or not. According to one guy I saw, one weather guy says it's the hottest summer on record since 1972, or hottest September. So we'll see what happens there, but then it'll drop into 45 at night. So uh, I'm better. I just don't feel 100% yet. So and then of course, for some reason, my stomach's been more hypersensitive than usual, and things that I used to eat without a problem are now becoming a problem. So I'm having to readjust my diet again, and that always is problematic. But I want to get into the topic of, are all religions cults? Yeah, I'm always glad when things get cooler. If it could be like Michigan fall all year round, I would be a happy person. But um, that's kind of my temperature range, 50 to 65, and I feel fine. But I want to talk about, are all religions cults? And I know a lot of you will probably say, "Yep," but I want to give the reasons for that. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is how religion indoctrinates. And then when you compare how religion indoctrinates and how cults indoctrinate, and you discover there's not a lot of difference, that's when you begin to realize that maybe just perhaps all religions have some cultic behavior to them. And the way a cult indoctrinates is they will start off, usually it's like a non-threatening event. Okay, like people get invited to some social event, some whatever. I remember in the church, when I was still in the church, we did this a lot too. We would have just events where people would come, and we just invite them, come to the potluck, come to our, Sunday night we have this thing going on where we're having this concert or this group of people or whatever. And it's a really non-threatening thing, and you just invite people in. So at this point, is population. Yeah, I'm going to agree with you, Fred, but I'm going to give good reasons why we should agree with that. And I suddenly realized that cults and religions both do this. They both invite people to non-threatening events, right? They both, I would say, the second way that a cult gets into you is they start to love bomb you almost immediately. And I think religions do that, churches do that. I lost track of the number of churches I was into when I was still in the church. We'd go into a new church and they would basically, go shake somebody's hand and hug somebody's neck, and just creating the emotional connections very early is very much uh, uh, there's a similarity in indoctrination to the point where I don't think there's much of a difference. 12-step programs, yes, excellent, Lisa. That's why I have a problem with 12-step programs anymore, because there's a lot of cultic kind of things that people do too. And this allows you to build this emotional connection. When people ask me why people stay in religion and faith, it's almost never a rational reason. It's the love connections, it's the relationship connections that people have. And that's true in cults, that's true in religions. And that at some point, both religions and cults will dangle a prize in front of people. Okay. In the case like of Christianity, the cultic prize is always eternal life through Jesus Christ. Okay. You'll have the same thing with Islam. You'll have the same thing with various cults. Do the same thing. They have this thing that you're trying to achieve, the ultimate thing that you're trying to achieve, and you'll put that out there in front of it. When I was preaching the gospel, what I would do is I would talk about all the benefits of following Jesus and all the benefits in the afterlife. You're going to have eternal life. You're going to see your friends and family again. You're going to, it's like this, you dangle all the things that people wish for in front of them. Okay, well, how do we get there? Okay. And how do you get people interested in all of that? Okay. How do get people to draw in? I remember when I was pastoring, being seeker sensitive was a big thing, thank you, Saddleback. But the idea was to bring people in relationship and then give them this prize of eternal life, give them this prize of being able to see loved ones, friends, give them, a sense of ultimate justice. When you really look at the major religions, they kind of have this inherent into their systems. And for me, Christianity is just a really, you know, how can I put this? Being a Christian is very much about all of this stuff. Christianity has all of it right in there. Okay. And then at some point, you get some sort of agreement. Okay, yes, this is how we're going to attain the prize. In Christianity, okay, you give your life to Jesus, you form a relationship with Jesus Christ, you start coming to church, you start doing all these things. You're starting to get getting an agreement with the person between you and the religion. And this is where I have a little bit more experience at this point. When I was a Christian education pastor, we had a great 1-2 punch because my senior pastor was a great evangelist. I was a far better, indoctrinator. I was far better at doing the other side of it. Once they were in, I was very good at keeping people in. Okay. That's what I did. And one of the ways is that I did it was to shut down dissent. Isn't it amazing how that when you're in a church, a regular mainstream church, they work very hard that anything contrary to what the religion says, they tend to either casually dismiss, or if somebody brings up a problem, oh, well, that's just not the way we do things around here. Getting rid of dissent allows you to focus the effort. It allows you to control the information. And by controlling the information, you can control the person. Okay. So, and if, people still want to be rebellious or dissenting or whatever, then what you do is you make them feel guilty about it. Okay. So for me, part of my job as a former Christian education pastor was to answer the questions to the point where there was no dissent, uh, and then get people to feel guilty a little bit about, oh, well, you're questioning God at that point, or you're questioning the Bible at that point. At that point, you're kind of really just trying to massage people into the attitude of never question the Bible, never question God. Okay. And for those of you that have been around for a while on this channel, you have seen this 100 million times, right? You've seen it where, a person really just never questions the Bible. They never question God. They never question their religion. And then, yeah, Fred, it's like you can't question that because you're risking the prize. You're risking the eternity. You're risking all that stuff. And that's when people really get, you're really starting to play with people's emotions. Now, notice you already opened the door of the emotional connection through the love bombing, through the emotional prize of eternal life and seeing your loved ones again and all this other stuff. And so you've already opened the door of emotional manipulation. The keeps giving you religious ads. Trust me, I know that. I'll take their money though, Foxfire. I'll take it. Okay, I'll take their money. They're paying me to be on my atheist channel. So, but yeah, it's this emotional carrot and stick at that point of you've gained so much in relationship with the community, you've gained this prize, you've gained all this stuff. Looking forward to this stuff is the emotional hold. And then you turn around, and if somebody starts to question the religious faith or the tenets or whatever, what happens? Oh, well, we try to make them feel guilty. Oh, you're sinning. You're disobeying God. You're disobeying the leadership. Don't touch the Lord's anointed was a big one in the Assemblies of God when I was in it. You leave the pastor alone. You leave the religious leaders alone. Don't touch the Lord's anointed. They're anointed of God. And that's where this emotional connection really is taken advantage of. And then after that, it's all about controlling people's identity, controlling the information around them, controlling their environment, make sure they're isolating themselves. I mean, it's like, Christianity has that built in, where, you're supposed to fellowship with believers, don't forsake the assembling of yourself together. What fellowship does righteousness have with unrighteousness, where you start to distance yourself simply because they're not Christians. Okay. So I'm not going to hang out with them, or they're not Islamic. I'm not going to hang out with them. They're not responding to the message. So, I think that's kind of a dead end. Let's go to somebody that will. And what you end up doing is controlling people's identity. When I look back at children's ministry, there's a lot of controlling of identity with kids. You're a child of the king. Okay. You're a child, you're a king's kid. You're special to Jesus. You're special to, the people around here. You're part of the body of Christ. Okay, that's a big one. If you read the Bible, you will find a lot of this controlling identity. Paul is actually very good at it, if you want to use good in terms of indoctrination, but he's very good at using, this is your identity in Christ, so this is therefore what you're supposed to be. So there's that aspect. And then you control the information, because if you're only hanging around Christians and Christian leaders, then it's very easy for the Christian leader to control what you hear. So you never hear anything contrary to what is said. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this as a former minister. And what I've discovered with my thoughts is, man, we did a lot of indoctrination. We wanted people to be at the church so much that they were never hanging around with any other friends. We wanted them to be obedient to the commands of Christ, quote unquote. But really what they were doing is being obedient to what we wanted. And this is particularly true in the Assemblies of God. Later on, when I got into my congregational church, to me, it was more about voluntary obedience at that point. And so I never really pushed that angle as much. So it's kind of one of those situations where you begin to realize that religions, the various successful religions in the world, have kind of this built-in prize, carrot and stick, guilt, complex thing, controlling identity, information, environment kind of thing. They have that ingrained into the system. I think I can speak for Christianity very, very well. I mean, if you read Paul, okay, you're a cult kid, Pentecostal. Yeah, me too. But yeah, I mean, the Pentecostal movement had that. Christianity had that in spades. It was bad. We it's the whole holiness movement back then that still had influence on the Assemblies of God at the time. And I never was allowed to go to dances, any social event that involved mixing between people who believed and didn't believe was not allowed. Teetotaler on alcohol meant that a lot of the people didn't get to go to the bar to hang out with other people. When you look at Christianity and some of its more fundy forms, you have a very cultic atmosphere. Now, I would also say, though, it's inherent into Christianity to be like that when you look at how they act and operate, because they're still putting the eternal life prize in front of you. They're still trying to use sin as a guilt tactic. They're still using carrot and stick. You don't want to go to hell or purgatory or whatever, so you want to go to heaven and be with your friends and relatives. So they're still using rewards and punishments. And then in this life, they're still using rewards and punishments. Like, you're good. There's more benefit to, following Jesus, reading your Bible, being, one of the angles of pressing people to a devotional life is to constantly talk about the benefits of having a devotional life and constantly talking about how you're going to be lesser of a Christian if you don't have a good devotional life. That's a reward and punishment. It's the constant, continual brainwashing, for the lack of a better term, of just pushing the difference between the two. Okay, that you have to be in this thing. Even mainstream Christianity does this. I mean, you can go to a regular mainstream Christian church, Episcopal, Presbyterian, whatever, and they still have this. So what ends up happening is people begin to develop this mentality, and what indoctrination does is you develop this mentality of, I got to do this so that I get the prize and avoid the punishment. And that is the entire mentality around indoctrination in a cult. And it's no different with most religions. I can't say that all religions are this way. I mean, except in a lot of it, it's just, there's still this idea of there's a benefit and there's to gain. There's some religions that focus on the benefit to gain and then don't even deal with punishments because there really isn't any. And then some other, I don't know if I can put all religions in this bag, but there's a good chunk of them, I think. And I would definitely say Christianity, I now label Christianity as a very large cult with various flavors. So, you can pick your flavor, I guess. If you're not into Neapolitan, you can go vanilla if you want. Um, uh, but yeah, I mean, for those of us, like, I had a more fundamentalist Pentecostal background. I see Mouth of Spaghetti is kind of in the same boat, very controlling. I didn't come from a homeschool environment, but I know that my parents spent a lot of time uh, talking to the pastor about what they were teaching at school and how to counter it, okay, with the faith. Uh, I don't know. I couldn't go to dances. I couldn't socialize very much with other people without the guilt trip being laid on me. And so I ended up staying in that. And I think one of the big negative effects, especially when you become a teenager and there's this purity culture layer gets layered on top of that as a part of the indoctrination, where the whole having sex outside of marriage is part of the indoctrination thing. You don't want to do that because this will be guilty and this, and this. And instead you want to save yourself for marriage. And it's like, I don't know if that's a good idea anymore. Okay, I don't think it's a good idea. So I don't know. Religion does intend to be ingrained in culture. Um, I don't know. I've had my problems since looking back at it. People ask me why I go to therapy, and one of them is guilt over some of the things that I did, as far as keeping people in the faith, because a lot of people are still in the faith because based on what I taught them back then. So, but when I look at it now, we all indoctrinate the same way, whether you're a cult or religion. The indoctrination steps are kind of the same. Bring people in non-threatening, love them, put the prize in front of them, put the reward, and then slowly bring in the indoctrination of what the faith is, and then have a punishment. So I don't know. For me, I've been very glad for my atheist therapist who we could talk the same language, and she used to be a Christian too, so she's deconverted. And we have, because she's more of how the professional of how this works, I really recommend therapy with, I think I always put recovery from religion in my videos, and it's a good source to do that. But this is kind of, the long-term goal for me when I was working as a Christian education pastor was what we called shutting the back door. Okay. Making sure people didn't leave. Okay. And we used guilt. We used carrot and stick. We used trying to answer all their questions as best as possible. Every pastor, Christian ed pastor, is somewhat an amateur apologist because people have questions, and so it can be difficult to find an atheist therapist. I got lucky. I'll be honest. I got lucky. I think recovery from religion is a good resource because you can specifically ask them, Foxfire, if the counselor is an atheist. I think you can ask that you can request that. And the real problem with therapy, of course, is they accept a lot of Christian religious therapist organizations into their ranks. And I really wish they would get rid of it altogether, but they don't. And so it can be kind of cloudy and muddy. That's why I recommend recovery from religion as a good starting point. It doesn't guarantee you anything, but it does kind of filter out a good chunk of it. But I recommend therapy because I need somebody to talk to about how I'm feeling. And as an autistic person, feelings are very, very difficult for me. And so it's taken her about a year and a half to build the trust level where I open up to her a lot now, and she doesn't judge me, okay, about some of the things I think. So, and then we come up with courses of action. I think the only reason I survived this summer from a hypersensitive point of view is therapy. So just dealing with it and all that. So there's that. I think I've kind of beat that one to death, other than to say I think a good chunk of religions are very cultic. There's a lot of truth. Not judgy. No, she doesn't judge me very much. I A good therapist has a lot of empathy about what you've been through. Okay, they may not agree with your way of dealing with it and coping with it, but they will definitely understand it. She's the first person that ever told me, "Holy shit, that's a very abusive environment you had as a pastor. Like people were abusive to you." And it's like, yep. uh, uh, so yeah, I don't know. I can't recommend it enough if you find the right therapist. And mine has been very gracious to me from a financial point of view because I think for about 2 years she took me pro bono because she felt I was worth the effort to do that. So kudos to her, but I now pay her money, but it's not a lot. So you can usually talk to a therapist about that. So they understand. Um, let's see. The other things on the agenda, I should probably talk about them. I was accused, actually, I wasn't asked. I was accused of being obsessed with that which does not exist. You're just obsessed with God. Why are you talking so much? Aren't you just showing you that you're obsessed with God? Um, Number one, how do you be obsessed with something that doesn't exist? I mean, I get it. There's fandoms and things like that, but we all recognize their fandoms. Um, I was asked, what am I obsessed with? What is this channel about that could be considered an obsession? I don't know, getting people to stop believing fairy tales, um, thinking that they're truth. Uh, how about helping people stop wasting their time, money, and opportunities on religion, which is just wishful thinking. I don't understand. I guess I understand where that objection comes from because I feel like this person must have been a Christian because they have that Romans 1:18 through 23 mentality that we all should know that there's a God just by looking at the universe, and somehow that's just the way the way it is. Um, yeah, I don't know. I was asked if it's an accusatory tone. Yeah, mouth. The thing is, yeah, there's a quote that says that religions are just large cults, and cults are just small religions, something to that effect. Um, and I kind of agree with that. There's cultic aspects in just about every religion that I've ever examined. Mostly the claim of the prize and what the truth is there. Uh, when we come back to atheism, this kind of leads to us. Is there anything that we're cultic about? That's a good question. Anybody think that atheists are cultic about something? I don't know. I get on. I'm not obsessed with it to the point where I'm trying to tell people how to live their life. Most of the time, what I'm doing here is, would you just leave me alone? Okay, just leave my atheism alone. I think it's perfectly legit to be an atheist and not be called on it. Not being in religion, yeah, I suppose that's true. But my whole thing, when I look at the motivations behind this channel, what drives me on this channel, despite the fact that I don't always, yeah, YouTube, we have cultic obsession with YouTube. I suppose that's true too. But what drives me on this channel is I spent so much of my life wasting it uh, with fairy tales and wishful thinking and believing things I wanted to believe because I wanted to believe them. Um, Having this emotional attachment to something that wasn't true. And I've kind of got into that mode where I want to live my life, based on truth as much as possible that I can verify. And I don't want to live my life on falsehoods anymore. And if I can help people through the stages of deconversion, I'm glad to do that too. I've been through enough of it where I can get you past the introduction. I can get you past the initial stages of it. Um, I think probably the first two issues that most people address is how am I going to live now, morally speaking, and what is the point? Okay. And what is the point? And the thing you have to get over, like if you come out of Christianity, they really push this angle of your life doesn't have any meaning unless it has an eternal point, like forever and ever and ever. And my response to that now is you can have a very valid, meaningful point to your life without eternity. Okay. You can have good morals and ethics and not believe in a God. Um, hey, I killed Earl. Poor Earl. Everybody says poor Earl every time I see you. What did Earl do? Hey, Blossom, good to see you. Um, but yeah, I've spent enough of my life looking at religion and realizing the cultic nature of it. That okay, but yeah, just my obsession. What am I obsessed with? It's certainly not with the existence with God that I don't feel exists. I'm obsessed, I guess, with how much people get hurt by something that's nothing more than a curl than a cult. It's just I feel for people still. One of the great myths of like when people hear that I'm autistic, they like assume that I don't have any feelings. I actually have very deep feelings. I just don't show them very well. And there's also some argument that whether or not autistic people are even neurologically equipped to show emotion. Okay, that's part of the problem. I've read that a couple places with a couple doctors looking at it. So our neurologist is different. And so I have very deep emotions about people that are caught up in bullshit. Okay. And because I was there, I have a very deep emotional connection to people who are going through deconversion. The moment I hear you're deconverting, I am immediately drawn to you, um, because I want to help you. Because I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt. I was an atheist in the pulpit for 2 years. I don't know if it gets any weirder than that. Having to preach bullshit while at the same time knowing it's bullshit. I don't know. I feel very emotionally compelled, I guess, obsessed, if you will, to help people that are struggling with their faith, to the point where I say, well, maybe your struggle is real, and the real solution is to dump it. Okay, I think my introductory video to this channel still says it as point number 5. I'm going to push you over the edge. If you're questioning your faith, I will push you right off that cliff. Okay, for your own good. Okay, you will discover that you have wings and you can fly. Without your religion, you don't need it. And so that's if I'm obsessed about anything, I guess that's that. But I'm certainly not obsessed about a God I don't think exists anymore. I'm not obsessed with Jesus. I'm not obsessed with the Bible anymore, other than I have to deal with people who think it's like the Word of God, and I'm like, no, not really, bro. Um, so it's kind of, that if I have an obsession, it's that, helping people get past the BS of the cultic thing that they've been indoctrinated in. And having been a Christian education pastor, this kind of goes with our earlier discussion, that um, once you realize the steps of indoctrination, and that pretty much most religions have them, you begin to see how people are manipulated into the religion, and showing people how that gets past that. That's pretty cool too. That's kind of fun. So, yeah, that's my obsession, I guess. But I'm certainly not obsessed about that which does not exist. I'm more obsessed with the negative effects that religion and cultic behavior and indoctrination have on people. And you feel like church is good if you don't have any friends. I don't know. That might be valid. Let me know how that works out. Just go to church and where you don't have any friends and see what happens. I don't know. People ask me if there's anything I miss, and I don't know. I'm starting to develop a community on YouTube, so I don't miss the lack of community as much. I really wish we had good choir songs so I could sing in a choir, again, because I do love harmonies and stuff like that. So so there's that. Somebody made some comments about my discussion of the Gospel of Luke this week in Questionable Witnesses. I wanted to address some of that stuff. Part of it is because I haven't addressed it yet, and I will later in those Bible studies. But there's always this clinging to what I would call any kind of thread of hope that the Bible is true. And a lot of these objections to what I said kind of have that feeling or that quality to them. One of them is, well, the writer of Luke, Acts, he must have been a close associate of Paul because of the we passages in the book. And I'm like, I can see at least a couple of alternatives. A waste of your time. Agreed. That's why I don't miss church either anymore, Mouth. There's just a few things that I wish we did better. But so the we passages in Luke, I have to address that because I won't get to that until I get to the later part of the book of Acts, which won't be for a while. There are many other explanations to that, for those of you that have commented on that. Number one, he could have been using a source, and so the we isn't him. And the other thing I would say is, who is we? Okay, who? Yeah, kind of. You make a good point. I haven't been back to a church since the day I left, and except once to attend somebody's anniversary. It wasn't for a religious service. I'm very curious how I would feel walking into a church, but I haven't done it since. And it's a good question. It's a very good question. I'm not really sure how I would feel being in a church, and that's probably why I avoid it. You're afraid you're going to burst into flames. Yeah, okay, it's possible. I don't know. Uh, boy, I don't know. I live at night, so I guess all the crosses might prove that I'm a vampire now. I don't know. Um, I don't know. I just when I look at how people view the Bible now and look at how it's preached, it's why I'm reacting to preachers. Uh, that's why I started reacting to preachers because it's I'm having a hard look at how I used to talk about the Bible. Vampire Club. I don't know. I mean, I'm up all night and sleep during the day. There's your first evidence. I don't like going into churches. There's your second evidence. Now, if I can just pull off the immortality, that would be the third, wouldn't it? Don't think that's the case. But yeah, I don't know. I just, when I look at how people look at the Bible, it's their lack of being able to find options. And this comment really just showed me that how the indoctrination process gets you to overlook the options of something um, like there's other options of how you could look at the text. Like Luke could have been using another source with the we passages. And then they brought up, something I'm going to get to about Christmas time with Mary's attitude, pondering things in her heart. Well, he must have known her closely. It's like, no, I can write a fictional story with people with emotions. It doesn't mean I know them. You can, they don't sparkle. Yeah. Yeah, I actually, Martin, have a favorite meme of mine where the caption is how Twilight should have ended. And it has the two main characters of Twilight, and behind them is Blade. So I've always found that one absolutely hilarious. I laugh at that one, the difference. Um, so, yeah, I mean, I never got into Twilight. I haven't even watched it. What turned me off to it, Martin? I remember when I was working at Walmart, and this is before COVID, and we had midnight releases of Twilight, and seeing all the 13 to 15-year-old girls dressed like goths out at midnight, like 200 to 500 of them every time we had one of those releases. And I'm like, what? Okay. Um, yeah. Uh, Getting back to our little discussion of Luke, yeah, the problem with Luke is we don't know who he is. Okay, we don't know who any of them are really. There's a lot of excusegetics about it, but it's just making excuses. Um, yeah, not we had the same thing when Harry Potter was being released. People would be around the block at night at midnight when they were released back in the day. So then streaming services became more and more popular. So that's gone away. We still do, like at my store, we still do releases. It's not as big a deal as it used to be. People come in later in the day and get a copy. So it's like they know there's going to be plenty. Actually, when you look at the authorship of the gospel sing, it's become a discussion in the chat a little bit. The biggest problem is none of them identify themselves. Yeah. I don't know. The more I looked at the gospels as I did Life of Christ, and that's why this series, Questionable Witnesses, is me doing the Life of Christ one last time as an atheist, and then I'm probably just going to drop it. But it's all the things I found out wrong with them over time. And you don't get past the first text in Luke 1 through 4, where you realize that the methodology, even if we knew who he was, is complete crap. I had somebody comment this week, like, oh, maybe Luke was a detective. Well, if he was a detective, he was a piss poor one, because he's just accepting stories and trying to put them together. That's not that's not good methodology. And then we don't know who he is, and we have no, my whole point of that video is we have no evidence that he actually followed this method, just his say so. It's complete hearsay, as Martin points out, complete hearsay. And uh and so, when you look at the gospel writings, to me, the best story about how they're written is they're written after the destruction of the temple, when the Christianity starts getting in its second, third generation, and the whole apocalyptic end of the world angle is kind of wearing off. And so it's at that point that the Christian church decides to preserve some things, including the stories about Jesus. It makes much more sense. Um, so, and then the disciples were killed. You're bringing that up, but there is no evidence for that. None. That is complete church tradition. Okay, that they were killed for their faith. And it's funny how Protestants will question Catholics on just about everything, but when it comes to the tradition of the martyrdom, no questions. Yep, all of them died that way. Okay, it's whatever fits your confirmation bias, I guess. And I see a lot of that when people comment on the Bible on this channel. They're very much, they're grasping at anything that says this Bible is true. And that's one of the things that they grasp at a lot, and it drives me insane, um, at times, but it's also expected. I expect it. Uh, Somebody else was going on and on about, Luke's unique material being stuff that he made up. Possibly, and possibly not. There's also the possibility that Matthew or Luke copied parts of each other. It's possible. Whoever wrote first got copied by the one who wrote second. But we just don't. The dating gets really fuzzy with both of those guys. So as to which wrote first, we know Mark wrote first, and probably high probability, and John wrote last, and the other two wrote in the middle somewhere. I don't know. Whenever I talk about the authorship of the Gospels, it's as you're watching this series, Questionable Witnesses, I'm going to deal with every gospel the first time it comes up, and every time I have to bring up one real big basic thing, the elephant in the room. None of them identify themselves. None of them. They're very vague if they try to. Okay. Well, this is the disciple who Jesus loved. Daniel brought up in the comments, John, being the beloved disciple. Well, that is very vague, and anybody can write that. Anybody can write that stuff. So I don't know. It just strikes me as odd, very, very odd at times, that people think that this stuff is genuine. Very misplaced, uh, in their dealings sometimes with the Gospels. And Luke always brings that out, especially with the weed passages and things like that. I'm trying to think if there are any other comments, and I don't think so. It's been kind of light this week because I've only done 2 videos. I know that with I Am Beggar, that video, holy cow. Mostly I'm thankful for the people who came by and said, this is how AI really works. Okay. Because I had no clue. I have no clue on how that works. And I Am Beggar just kind of really gets it wrong a lot. He really does. So, and a lot of people pointed that out, I think, for that. So it's kind of one of those great moments when other people come into my videos and say, hey, I can speak with some authority about this. But my biggest thing with him, I feel bad for him. As somebody mentioned, I think I Am Beggar is very much a person afflicted with Stockholm syndrome. And it's just kind of, no matter what he does, he's always out there just trying to do his thing. And so, it's kind of a real problem for him. I've done a couple of his videos, and the animations are great. Uh, the theology and philosophy is really poor. So that's kind of where I am with him. Uh, but every once in a while, he puts a video out like that. And the real problem I have with the problem of evil is every time I see an apologist do it, their chief defense is to water it down every damn time. And it just drives me insane when they do that. Um, it's sad. I used to do that too. Well, maybe evil isn't as bad as it is. And every time I see somebody do the thing that he does, which is, well, we got a better result by having evil. And like, well, that kind of destroys all the Christian theology, saying that the fall is the fall. How is it a fall then? Maybe it's a step into enlightenment. Maybe we should call it the day of enlightenment for the human race instead of the fall. Stuff like that. But they never deal with the evil that actually happens on a daily basis around the world. Little children dying of starvation, unspeakable evils being done to other people, and God's in the corner watching the whole thing, doing nothing. It just, I don't know. I don't know. It just, oh my God, it amazes me. Yeah, Earl. The real problem I have with debate, I got yelled at this week, probably by one of Jim Bob's followers. Well, why don't you go on his show and prove him wrong? I says, well, because it's impossible to prove somebody who always thinks they're right wrong. Okay, I mean, if I have always left a crack the door. Yeah, Jim Bob. I don't like I shut him down. He's not allowed to comment here anymore. And I won't deal with him very often other than when I have to. But, it's like my response was, I think I already did in this video. I think I already proved him wrong. Okay. But he would never see it that way. And it's why I don't debate. I've been yelled at for that for a lot of times. I don't debate people. I guess if it was a truly formal debate with a formal moderator and it was live and in public, I might consider it, but I'm not going to debate somebody on YouTube. It's kind of pointless. It really is pointless talking to a lot of people. The one thing I learned from my own deconversion is you have to let people mull on things and think about things themselves for a while. You can say something that'll get them thinking, and that's about it. After that, it's really up to them whether they're going to stay believers or not. Whether a person believes it or not is really very much outside their control, whether they realize it or not. So, um, so, I mean, I've given the real problem I had with a lot of the comments coming to the defense of I Am Beggar, which there were very few. In fact, there were some Christians that came on that video and said, yeah, he gets Christian theology really bad and things like that. So he isn't universally loved. But at the same time, they never really deal with the real evil that exists. Okay, they always water it down. I mean, I have to use my example all the time with them when I get into debates with them. Sometimes it's like you realize that you can have a child being sexually assaulted by somebody, and God is literally sitting in the corner of the room watching the whole thing with the power to stop it, and doesn't, if I take your belief in God seriously. And that just doesn't make any sense. He can't be benevolent at that point. He can't be all loving at that point. Having talked to a lot of people, but they don't want to give you that scenario. They want to, oh, it's just suffering and that'll teach you something. And as somebody who follows Stoic philosophy, yeah, sure, to a point. that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger to a certain point. After a certain point, it just, leads to a lot of bad coping mechanisms and possibly death. That doesn't do you any good either. So there's I don't know, that whenever I deal with the problem of evil, it's always distasteful every time somebody tries to defend somebody has these arguments. Um, I don't know. I, Daniel, I tend to agree with you. I think evil is just a way of trying to describe the dark side of humanity. And I don't think, though, that we are as dark as people make us out to be. Okay, as religion makes us out to be. I think there's a lot to be said for the fact that we notice when things go wrong and we don't notice when things go right. And there's a lot more right going on in the world. We just don't notice it because it's not what we're evolutionary conditioned to pay attention to. We're evolutionary conditioned to pay attention to things going wrong. And so we don't notice the good in life. And religion reinforces that, unfortunately. Um, Yeah, exactly. Well, he's not just in the room. He knows everything that both sides are feeling. He knows everything about the situation. And what gets worse, Mouth, is that happens how many thousands of times every day, every hour, and he does nothing. Okay. That is probably the biggest proof that either God doesn't exist, the omni God certainly doesn't exist, or if he does exist, he's not benevolent. He doesn't give a shit. So and that's the problem. A lot of people want to defend this God, and that really just bothers the hell out of me. Okay, it's like it's not the God that bothers me; it's the fact that people want to defend it. It's all going to come out in the end. It'll all work out for the good. I think I Am Beggar does this one line. I didn't get a chance to comment on it. I'll comment it on it now. But he's like, all the people that have suffered needlessly and yet still did good, they'll be reimbursed. How do you reimburse somebody who goes through something like that? How the hell do you do that? I think it was Sir Sick who had the best thing I ever heard about this. If you cut off my arm, no matter how much you reimburse me for that, you still cut off my arm. Okay, it's just it's like, how do you make up for that stuff? I mean, how do you make it up to children that have been molested, or people who have been raped, or how do you do that? How do you make up for that? Okay. I don't know how you make up for emotional mental trauma. I don't know how you make up for that without literally doing some sort of mental lobotomy on them where you remove all that stuff. How do you do that? I have there was the one thing as a theist that bothered me constantly is, how do I make it up for the people who needlessly suffer? How do you do that? And there's just no good way to do it. Okay, you can't make it up to them. You could ask for healing, but a God who is non-existent doesn't provide healing. Um, I've had this argument before because I suffer from a little PTSD from people who threaten me inside the church. Okay, in my last church, I had one guy in particular was always wanted to be in charge. He was kind of a sociopath, but he was also a cop, and he also carried a gun all the time because he was a cop. And every once in a while, he would just kind of reach to that spot where he would pat his gun when he had a disagreement with me. Okay, and so it's like, so I have a little bit of anxiety about that. And then on top of that, the religious trauma syndrome of going through all the religious crap on top of that as well. So yeah, there's another good reason to have therapy. Um, I don't have a problem necessarily with gun ownership, just so you're aware. It's the way some people use it that bothers the shit out of me, and that was one of them. That scared the living crap out of me every time he would do that. So it's the issue is mostly how people use it to threaten people. That I have a large problem with. Um, so yeah, he would do that, and then I have the religious trauma on top of that, and then it's why I don't go to church anymore. It's why I don't go into them. I have a hard time walking around my block. Um, yeah, I mean, because how do you fix past injustices when they happen is a very, very good question. And I don't think religion or theological belief does any of that. How do you make it up to somebody, to a child who's been molested 5, 6, 7 years of their life? How do you make that up to them, even in eternity? How do you do that? How do you make it so that didn't happen, plus they get restitution? How do you do that? I don't think you can. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how you make it up to people, and it scares the crap out of me. Um, and I don't think you can. And the problem is people want that so badly that they'll continue to believe in mythology. And what they really need is not so much somebody to make it up for them, but somebody to help them walk them out of it as much as they can. I don't know how somebody would ever get over something like that. I'm not sure I'm ever going to get over religious trauma or even some of the PTSD I have from being threatened on occasion. Um, every church of mine had a deacon board member that threatened something. How do you walk out of that? One step at a time. You're always going to be affected by it. It's why I do this deconversion thing and trying to normalize it, because until it's normalized, we can't have good discussions about this without somebody trying to. I'm happy today, like in the comments today, they're very minimal Christian, I think, thankfully, because that's what we guard against. Okay, because every time we start to talk about these issues, what happens? Somebody comes up and said, "Well, if you just gave it to Jesus, hey Randy, if you just gave it to Jesus, then it would be all better." And it's like, I I don't believe in magic anymore. Okay, and that's what you're asking me for, magic. Okay, it's why they keep going back. I don't know. Yeah, it's frustrating because, whenever I deal with the problem of evil, like with I Am Beggar earlier this week, it was like I was glad that a lot of the stupid commenters didn't show up, but there were a couple. I noticed some of you got into some pretty good discussions with some of them. Um, there's one guy that comments that nobody comments back and forth with anymore. He just doesn't deal with it. Yeah. My I'm not going to tell you that there's going to be a magic wand waved over your life if you're deconverting and all the trauma is going to go away. I can tell you, after walking this walk for, what is it, 9 years now, of no longer being a Christian, and 8 years of no longer, you know, all of that. Um, all I can tell you is it does get better. I won't say it goes away. Okay, I won't say it goes away. And so I stick around helping people deconvert and trying to get people to leave you alone about it. Okay. you know, uh, it's the one thing that bothers me the most. People are really going through something emotionally when they're deconverting. And then somebody's got to come in and say, well, if you weren't deconverting in the first place, you'd be all right. And it's like, I was never all right in the church. Anybody else got this experience? I never felt good in the church, ever. I was always the sinner in the hands of an angry God, and it never felt comfortable. And since leaving that, there is one thing that's really good. I don't motivate myself by guilt anymore. I don't. Okay. It's more about how can I be better today? How can I do better today? How can I help somebody today? Yeah. Uh, yeah, I was taught I was a sinner. You don't go through a Sunday domination, Christian domination, without being taught you're a sinner. Uh, I think one of my early pastors when I was a kid thought that Jonathan Edwards was a prophet. I swear. He referred to that sermon a lot. Um, sinners in the hands of a angry God. And once you get over the mythology of it, it's like, okay, if the myth didn't happen, then all the stuff that the myth is based on, all the religious stuff the myth is based on, and that happens. But when I watch people who come out of very fundamentalist denominations and it's sad because they have to get over a couple things. A lot of you are mentioning in the comments that people aren't inherently evil and sinful is one of the things you get over, because that just builds a distrust. That's a very good indoctrination technique to build distrust with everybody else except the people that are in the group that are saved. That's a technique. Getting rid of your individuality, excellent point. You gotta conform to this boxed Christianity. You got to do that. All the things we talked about earlier. Oh, you don't want to leave this because there's so many people that love you and care about you, and the love bombing is constant and continual. All of that stuff. Okay, all of that stuff is the way people get at you. In the church, I was always stressed out. I was always beat up about whether I was good enough to God. All that's gone. Okay. And now I'm able to actually deal with the issues that I really have. Um, recent discoveries such as being autistic and being hypersensitivity. Okay, that makes a hell of a lot more sense. And now I can deal with it. And I don't have to answer to a Bible that I now know is largely fiction. I won't say there's you can read the wisdom literature, and yeah, there's wisdom in there that's in other wisdom religious literature and other literature that isn't religious. I mean, loving your neighbor as yourself, I think that's impossible, but treating people like you want to be treated is pretty universal and pretty secular. You get over that stuff. What you don't get over, and what's much harder, the intellectual stuff is easy. It's the emotional stuff that's harder, much, much harder. If you've been abused in the church, that's hard. If you have always been made to feel guilty about who you are and scared about who you are all the time, all this crap, right? That stuff is harder to get over. And I'm still getting over some of it. I won't say that I've arrived, and I may never arrive. Okay. I just want to be honest with everybody. I just, yeah, hell is a asshole. You're right. Welcome. Good to see you. But hell is probably one of the most manipulative things I went through as a fundie. At constant fear that you're going to be burned forever and ever in a lake of fire was one of the big things that the Assemblies of God did to you. So still does. I don't know. Every time, life went bad for me. Well, God's getting after you. Every time, something good happened in your life, the indoctrination becomes, well, that's God doing good things in your life. You never get to take the credit or actually take responsibility for what you do. Okay. The one thing that I will say is a little harder is realizing that when I screw up, it's me. It's not the devil made me do it. It's not God made me do it. It's me. When I do something right, one of the big things I have trouble with is when things go well. Okay. Did I do that? It's really hard to take credit for things that you do well when you've been told all your life, give that back to God. It's only possible because of God. And you can never build yourself up when you do something right. Which would be one of the great defenses against being an idiot. I mean, feeling bad about yourself. But yeah, it's like, you know, people, I don't know, I just getting rid of that stuff, but then also dealing with the emotional side of it. You know, I lost a lot of friends when I left the church, and that was hard, and it still bothers me. Um, and most of it was them walking away from me, not the other way around. So it's kind of one of the hard things I've had. It's like, I don't know. It's the emotional side of deconversion that takes a while, and it's fine. I try to be a resource for that, but I know there's a lot of other ones out there. I recommend them. From therapy to just watching other people going through it. Um, I don't know. It to me, that's the issue, is the emotional issues now. It's not the mental ones. I mean, I can see how the Bible is fairy tales very easily now. Um, it's the emotional stuff of what you go through in church as a kid. I still deal with stuff from when I was a teen. It's all the rest of that stuff, the purity culture bullshit, and um, I ended up in a marriage that I think was because it was just a default, because I wasn't allowed to marry outside the faith. And that just kind of left me with very, very few options. And so you end up forming relationships with people based on the fact that they're Christians, and they're not really the best person for you to have a relationship with. Okay. And in our case, it was the guilt, you know, yeah, exactly. Guilt and shame. It was the guilt and shame of the trip that they put on you about having sex, as a Christian. And so you have to get married in order to get rid of the guilt and shame. The problem is that doesn't really go away. Okay, it doesn't go away because then they still pound on you about it. I don't know. It's the emotional side of deconversion, guys. That's the problem, and it's the indoctrination that we talked about earlier that leads to that emotional side. The whole carrot and stick thing, the whole rewards and punishment is what leads you to guilt. Okay. The whole, you're giving up on something, the eternal life and wishful thinking and seeing your relatives, and that causes you to have a downer that's not going to happen. I remember the first time I visited my father's grave after I was no longer a believer. I finally had closure, but it was an emotional down. I mean, I cried, must have been 10 minutes, because I knew I was never going to see my father again at that point, ever. Um, and getting rid of that allowed me to move on. Um, I, yep, me too. I still have a desire to see my family again that are dead, and I still want to hang out with my family that I love and care for. But at the same time, now knowing that that's very temporary, I take it a lot more seriously. Yesterday, I went over to my daughter's house, and my youngest grandson, who's the youngest grandchild, he's like 14, 15 months. He loves me. He laughs every time I see him, and I am eating that up because I know that those experiences are not going to last forever, and someday they'll be gone. And I appreciate every moment like that in life far, far more than I ever used to. Okay, far, far more. Um, it's like, I have to tell you, if you're deconverting, realizing that you are not around forever and that every moment in your life may never come back again, that is the thing. That is the thing. Okay. I'm getting ready for a vacation. It's kind of a mini week-long sabbatical. I'm pretty much going to be by myself for the week. And all I want to do is kind of enjoy life for a week, do some of the enjoyment things, go get out, see some of the fall colors, hopefully, and just, think about things for a while and just enjoy the fact that I'm alive. Okay. And I appreciate those moments far, far more. Okay. You know, keep your eye on Fred. We all keep our eye on Fred. It's okay. He tends to behave himself around us. So I don't know about if that's true. I don't know if you're cute, Fred. I don't know. I don't know. Um, I don't know. I mean, getting rid of the guilt, fear stuff, and then learning how to take joy in the life you have. Religion never allows you to do that because you're never good enough. But you can be good enough in real life. Okay. You know, I've Earl, me too. Okay. There's a lot of things I can't control that are just fate to me. I take a very, I don't know, very stoic view of fate, which is that which I cannot control is fate. But there is things that I can control and that's not. And that's what I focus on. And when I have an experience that's a good human experience, I tend to focus on it and live in it and take joy in it. It's amazing how religion, I used to have good things happen in my life, and somebody would always in religion would always be the downer, going, "Oh, well, that means something else bad's going to happen," or you wouldn't have that without God, or you wouldn't, it's like you can't escape it. And now when I have a good experience, it's much more enjoyable. I live in the moment. So Michael, I don't know if we're superheroes, but I do think everybody who deconverts and goes through a bunch of shit is a little bit of a hero. I look at all of you deconverting as a little bit of a hero, okay, because you're having to face the truth about stuff, and that is so hard. It's so hard. Um, we do have, I guess, an origin story, I guess, of sorts. Of mine's rather long, but it does take bravery to pull out of that stuff and get away from it. And I don't know if we're superheroes, but I think we're all heroes to a certain extent. Because I've had, you know, I guess the best example I can think of off the top of my head is realizing that my marriage was based on a lot of falsehoods. Um, and once those falsehoods disintegrated for me, what was it based on? And it was a question that me and my ex-wife could never answer. And that became its downfall. So Clark Kent. Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I want to be Clark Kent. I'd rather be Bruce Wayne. He's a millionaire. He's got nice toys. Um, I don't know. Yeah, there's just stuff. My ex-wife is still a Christian. Yes, she goes to church. Um, she never gave it up. Um, she still goes with her mother and her aunt to church every Sunday, I think. So my daughter is still a Christian too, although I love her to death, and we get along really well because we're a lot alike and we mesh that way. And then my middle child is not a believer by default. He just doesn't really care. um, his story is rather interesting because when he was 18, he was doing the sound at church and somebody yelled at him about it and he walked out of church and never went back. Um, and my oldest has oscillated between faith and non-faith pretty much for the last 10, 15 years. So he's a football coach. So being an atheist is not necessarily something that's going to get across to all his players. So I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, billionaire Ed. I wish. So independent wealth. It's my aim. I don't know. Oh, yeah, I don't know. I've had great fun with this channel, I guess, and part of the motivation is going after making it successful. So, and I think that's kind of where I'm going to end with some announcements. I made some announcements last week. I am not going to make any promises this week because I'm still about 80% health wise. Um, if if the Michigan weather could decide whether it wants to be 80 or 50, it would be great. But it oscillates between those two every day, 50 at night and 80 during the day. So I think that's part of the problem. It's really kicking my hypersensitivity, particularly to food in high gear. Uh, I've never had good luck when things have been warm eating anything and it's sitting well in my stomach. So it's usually the main problem. And then of course that high heat times leads to some depression. Me and my therapist have noted that connection that when the weather is warm, I'm more depressed. Um, so that's kind of, so I'm not going to make any promises. I am thinking about how to do things differently so that the whole thing just has a rotation and I just work on YouTube for an hour and a half every day. And whatever I get done, I get done. If I don't get something done, I don't post anything. So it's kind of, I'm rethinking how I do things in order to deal with this stuff. So, but yeah, this week was not good. I missed work on Sunday because I wasn't feeling. That's how bad I was feeling that day, and I've been feeling better every day since. But it's just, damn it, damn it. Um, I hate feeling this way though. I know I'm taking care of myself and I'm listening to my body more and more every day, but um, so I don't know. I don't know. I keep struggling with this stuff. I'm still very new to dealing with hypersensitivity, and I'm trying to figure my particular form of it out. So, um, Earl, I'll tell you a story about genes in the church. I was around in Pentecostalism in the 70s and 80s, and the girls were still had to wear dresses to church, and it took me a long time to see women wearing slacks in the church and thinking it was disrespectful. So there was a time, I remember as a child all the way into my early teens where the girls in my church did not wear jeans. They had to wear dresses. Um, so it was I still find it weird sometimes when I see it, but I haven't been in church in 9 years, so I did not wear dresses as ho. I did not wear dresses. Um, in fact, back then I was far more obsessed with what wore dresses and skirts, being a teen at the time. So sundress. Oh, okay. I was, yeah, much more worried about temptation than anything else back then. So it was, my youth was a weird time. Growing up in a Pentecostal fundamentalist church during the 80s was probably the weirdest experience I think anybody could ever have. But yeah, there were long arguments about whether girls should wear jeans in the church back then. Hell, we were still arguing about Christian rock and roll being of the devil. So, um, which everybody plays it in church now. So I don't know. I don't know. Growing up in that time frame, I was just, holy cow. Oh, you guys are great in the chat. I'm glad I left the chat on for people to watch later. It's hilarious. But yeah, I mean, it's a weird time to grow up and with the whole purity culture stuff and the guilt of that, it's amazing how now I look back and boy, we were indoctrinating with that too. I think there's a lot of truth to cults try to control your wallet and your sex life. And if they get those two things, they got you. Um, so yeah, Bren, we have funny chat. I mean, the cast of characters right now in chat is some of the funniest people we have on this channel. I'll give you that. You guys are hilarious. Um, so so I love y'all. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just hopefully this week I'll get out a little bit more content, but I'm not going to push myself. I'm just gonna I'm talking about you as well, Victoria. Yes. Um, you have no idea what I'm talking about, Fred? Okay. I think you do. Um, oh, this is why I love you guys. I feel so much better with you guys in the chat. It just makes my day so much better than the last couple of streams where we've had Christians wall to wall, just typing one comment right after another. So much better. Um, you wore a kilt. Now that is an acceptable skirt, Coyote. Being somewhat Scottish myself, that is an acceptable skirt, but you have to wear it like you're supposed to. So kilts are acceptable. It burned to the ground. Which church was that, Azo? Which church to burn to the ground? And were you holding a lighter at the time? So, Ace Methodist. Oh, okay. All right, all right. Oh man. Uh, yeah, Azo did start the fire. Yes, I can see that. I can see that. Um, uh, well, folks, I am going to call it good. I need to rest some more. I'm just very, yeah, thank you. I thank you for the laughs, guys. It makes me feel a lot better. Seriously, all seriousness, thank you. This community has really brought me up from time to time, and this is one of the good times. Thank you, thank you. But I got to run. I'm feeling really tired, and I think I need a nap. So I'm gonna let you all go. Thank you all for stopping by. I appreciate every single one of you. Anybody who's watching the stream later, live your best life. Don't waste it on religion or faith or any of that stuff, but give it to your family. Enjoy the moments. Build a better community. You guys are awesome. I appreciate every single one of you that stopped by. Like the video, get it out there. I may pull some cuts from this later this week. We'll see. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you, and you guys have a good night, and I'll catch you next time.